I will press recording in progress, which is great. Secondly, because this is not a typical webinar platform, it is the Zoom open meeting. Would you mind everybody putting yourselves on mute? Just kill off any background noise. But do keep your video on. If you feel comfortable, that would be fantastic. Do also please ask questions through the chat function, which, as I'm sure you're all aware of, is on the bottom menu bar. And when we get to open questions, please just do it by raising a hand. That would be fantastic. So yeah, keep yourselves on mute. If you want to go on video, that's brilliant. And that's the way we're going to do it. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So this webinar is part of the AMEC Measurement Month, which you can follow or find out everything that's been going on over the last month around the world using the hashtag, hold on, I was going to keep multitask here by letting people into the from the waiting room, using the hashtag AMECMM. And for those of you who don't know AMEC, Jen is going to dive into it a little bit more in her session, her piece. But AMEC is a global trade association that it has a charter to spread the gospel around best practice in measurement and evaluation. And its purpose is to provide education, materials, and leadership to ensure the PR industry maintains its focus on valuing the work that we do. So this webinar is a co-production, if you like, between AMEC Measurement Month, CARMA, which is a global media monitoring, PR measurement and market research firm that operates globally, and the Greater London group of the CIPR, which, as I mentioned, I'm chair. So before I introduce our wonderful panel, I'd just like to say that I believe that proving the value of what we do as PR practitioners will be even more important in 2023 than it has done previously. Because with the country facing such strong economic headwinds, budgets, performance, whether in-house or agency, will come under more scrutiny than ever before. And my simple assertion is that if you can't prove value in 2023, then you need to be nervous. You need to be worried, because we have to prove that value. Now, we've been talking about measurement and evaluation as an industry for as long as I've been in PR. In fact, my dear father was in PR during the 60s, and he spoke about the difficulty in measuring what he did when I was a mere babe on his knee. We had some fascinating conversations as father and son. So today's webinar means a lot to me, both professionally and personally. And so I expect there'll be some lively debate over the next hour. So our format today is that I'm going to ask each of our three panelists to make some opening remarks. Jen has got a brief presentation to share, as long as the technology works. And then we'll move on to a panel discussion. And then hopefully we'll spend about 35 to 45 minutes with the panel. I will ask them some questions in true panel format. And then we'll open up to questions. But as I say, if you've got questions that come to you as we go along, just put them in chat. I will monitor it, and I can raise them as we go. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panel that you see on the screen. I'm delighted to be joined by them. They're a stellar panel of experts from three different parts of the industry. We have Jen Sanchis, representing the measurement vendor community. Jen is an account director with CARMA, where she works with multiple global blue chip brands, providing interpretive analysis, actionable insight, and strategic guidance. Also delighted to welcome Leanne Pinney, who is a senior associate with Freuds Plus, which is part of the Freuds empire. Freuds Plus work is guided and informed by best-in-class behavioral change science and psychology, and they've worked with clients including the NHS, Cabinet Office, Sport England, and Terence Higgins Trust, to name but a few. And finally, I'm delighted to welcome Lorna Gozzard, who is the Director of Communications and Marketing at the Royal College of Art. Lorna started her career in agency after leaving Oxford before moving in-house for the past 10 years. And she is both a chartered marketeer and a chartered practitioner, and a chartered PR practitioner with the CIPR. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jen to start with to whip through her wonderful presentation. Jen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Hi, everyone. So I'd like to introduce this panel discussion with a very short introduction presentation to set the scene a little bit. And this presentation is going to start on a very high note. We live in a very chaotic world, right? The world is very volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex. And to a certain extent, it can be quite hostile. Our world faces challenges like a financial crisis, Brexit, COVID, a war in Ukraine, a cost of living crisis. And every time, this is not just a crisis to consumers, it's also a threat to businesses and consequently to PR. Now, as PR people, we're responsible for building reputations, running campaigns, tracking competitors, mitigating crises when they happen, building industry awareness as well. So how do we do it all? We need to be able to be effective with our communications and our PR work, but we also need to be able to demonstrate that effectiveness. And that's not an easy task. We live in a world where the media is changing at the speed of light, but also where the media shapes society more and more every day. And as a result of this, companies do see the increasing value of reputation and the increase of intangible assets when it comes to business value. The media is rapidly evolving, and we have seen the rise of the data economy as well. Data is the new oil. Tech companies are now leading our global economy. Data is everywhere, and we ourselves generate data every day. So that means that we're surrounded by data. And in fact, we're now drowning in our own data. And that's no wonder. That's because the pool of people generating that data is getting bigger. There's more people on this planet than ever before. There's more mobile users than ever before. There's more access to the internet than ever before. And there's a record number of social media users as well. So there are more and more users, but we also spend more time consuming and digesting traditional and digital media content. And research has shown that we consume more and more digital media specifically. So then when we end up measuring our performance, then it's no wonder that we end up with really meaningless numbers. We look at vanity metrics, etc. Again, it's because we're all drowning in our own data. So let's say that you work for an organization like Microsoft, for example. You end up with these huge figures, 200,000 articles, billions and billions in impressions. But what does it mean? How do we make sense of these figures? I work in measurement, and I'm not sure I understand these figures. These figures do not really make sense at all because they are so big. But why are they so big? Another reason is because we're now looking at globalized audiences. If you take an outlet like bbc.com, for example, you get 200 million monthly unique visitors with web traffic primarily from the US, not only from the UK, but also other Commonwealth countries, English-speaking countries, other countries where there are English speakers. So there is now a real international focus when it comes to doing comms and PR. And AMEC, which is the trade association of the measurement and evaluation of comms, as Andy said earlier, they did a survey a while ago and asked comms people, what is the focus of your activities? What is your focus of your campaigns? And almost 40% said that the focus of their campaign was global, and that's really significant. When we look at the impact of a global campaign, you inevitably end up drowning in data and meaningless figures, and that makes complete sense, right? Now, in addition to this, our audiences are incredibly fragmented, meaning that it becomes harder and harder to find relevant data and the data that we need. For example, we're seeing a record trust gap between high and low income. And again, this adds more complexity to our measurements that vanity metrics and really simplistic figures can't really inform you about. Age is another important indicator when we look at how we consume media. It's an important nuance when it comes to our targeting efforts that we need to consider. If you're a boomer, for example, you'll be more inclined to consume significantly more TV content. If you're a Gen X, you might consume more TV content as well, but also a bit of radio, a bit of TV online, some websites. If you're a millennial, you might consume more streaming content. If you're a Gen Z, video content is absolutely king. So you can really see again how much data there is when it comes to media metadata and audience data. There is just so much data out there that really simplistic measurement programs can't really give you the nuance that you need, that would really help you show you the true value of your PR effectiveness. And they don't even try to. So we are operating in a really complex, tricky environment. We're all very busy doing activities, campaigns, trying to reach our objectives, our targets. And I get it, we're all very busy. But at the end of the day, how do we prove business value? Because if we can't prove our effectiveness, unfortunately, our PR budgets will be threatened and we won't get a seat at the table. So if it doesn't bring value at the end of the day, it is meaningless. It's as simple as that. So in other words, if you're just doing stuff for the sake of being busy, if you're just sending out stuff, you're not supporting your organization's objectives and you're not generating any value either. And the last thing that we want is being seen as sending out stuff. So is this really the perfect storm that we are seeing here? If more than ever before, we need proper measurements, and there's never been that many meaningless metrics out there? That's a really good question. Today, right now, finance directors hope for the best and plan for the worst. So all line items of costs will be put under a microscope, and PR must show that it is more than just a cost center. But it's not all doom and gloom, and I'll be delighted to tell you now, there are some solutions. And all these solutions involve, you will have guessed, meaningful measurements. So not just the counting of stuff, so to speak, but in fact, good measurement and evaluation can help you retain some of that budget when things get a bit difficult. And that's why good measurement isn't just nice to have, it should be an integral part of communications. So now that I've set the scene a little bit, how do we actually make measurement part of the PR and comms strategy? Luckily, help is at hand with AMEC. Again, it is the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications. And it exists to drive education and best practice of meaningful measurement globally. And it provides a number of free resources on the website as well. AMEC is essentially the tide that tries to lift all boats. If the profession becomes more equipped for better measurements, then our clients will want better and more measurement, and the industry will get the credibility that it deserves. So there's a number of initiatives that AMEC has launched over the past few years, but I'd like to focus on the main initiative, which is the integrated evaluation framework. The integrated evaluation framework is translated into 22 languages. It is used in several countries around the world. It is the framework that is widely accepted as best practice on how to measure comms in a meaningful manner. It is free to access, so we can all find it on this link, and it provides a wealth of information that all PR practitioners can benefit from. It was created by a wide group of practitioners, academics, including Professor Jim McNamara, for those who know, PR agencies, trade associations as well. And the framework essentially looks like this. So it's made of several categories, from objectives to activities, outputs, outtakes, outcomes to organizational impacts. It's super user-friendly, it's interactive. If you go on the website, you can click on the different cells. It will tell you exactly what to input. It's really handy. You can do it yourself. You can save all the information. Again, it will tell you what to input, and then you can save a PDF, which you can share with your team. So if you're brand new to measurement, it's a really great start. So we need to measure better, but what does it mean exactly? It means that we need to speed up our measurement. Newsmaking is 24/7, so we need to be timely to be relevant. It means that we need to review our reporting style. Are quarterly analysis reports enough, or do we need monthly insights reports or campaign reports, or perhaps do we need some live news alerts? It means that in addition to our measurements, we need to be able to get good insights. Counting stuff is just not enough. We need to align our outcomes in a meaningful way so that our comms and organizational objectives are all aligned. Measuring better means that we need to upscale. It means that we need to understand what vanity metrics are and what's the difference between outputs and outcomes, for example. We need to use appropriate automation. We can look at quantitative research methods, but also we shouldn't forget qualitative research. And finally, measuring better means that we need to be relevant to our organization. PR budgets, again, will be threatened if the PR function operates in silo. So it needs to speak to the bottom line. PR efforts needs to speak to the organizational goals to demonstrate value. And this is it for me. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jen. It's given us a huge amount to think about. And I would just say that we will make Jen's presentation, assuming Jen nods at this point, available to all. And I also would absolutely endorse all of the materials that AMEC has on its website. Indeed, if you're not a member of AMEC, there is even more information and more education, best practice, ways in which you can take your organization to new heights in measurement expertise by being a member of AMEC. And it's not quite cheap as chips, but it is a very, very good investment for any organization or individual looking for education, best practice, and these frameworks. We'll revisit that in the panel session. But now I'd like to invite Leanne to make her opening remarks.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Jen. That was really, really interesting. I guess if we're sort of touching on this this sort of theme of why it's even more important than usual to sort of prove our value in PR, I suppose I can talk a little bit about how, from my background, I used to work in market research solely, and now have moved into PR. And it's quite interesting just in the past year or so of how, of trying to get people to see the importance of research and of data, but also how to distill that into the most useful and important bits of data. And I mean, I could go on and on and on about what even is an insight. Is it a new perspective? Is it a cohesive sort of picture of all the information you found? Is it a new idea? But I would say that, yes, it's absolutely becoming more crucial to prove value with PR through data. This can, I mean, not only can this sort of be a great way to measure success of your campaign, but also it's commercially viable. It means that when you're making your decisions at the start of the campaign, your strategic approach, or even throughout the campaign, you can do that with confidence. And you can know that you have tested this, you know, or you can predict what the outcome is going to be. And it should always be in your mind to have this sort of test and learn approach.
Sorry, caught me by surprise. I was just writing a question down there. Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. I think what I'd like to do when we get to the panel discussion is really sort of dig into the sort of what data do you most commonly use, where do you find it, how do you extract it, and then how do you interpret it. So we'll come on to that in the panel discussion. But it'd be really interesting now to hear from Lorna, who's coming from the other side of the fence, the in-house side, but also from an individual who is looking at both communications and marketing for an astute organisation, the Royal College of Art. So Lorna, over to you.
Thanks very much, Andy. And actually, it was quite interesting when I started thinking about this question that actually the first thing that occurred to me is that I very, very rarely actually talk about PR evaluation as a standalone, particularly internally. As Andy's mentioned, my role spans both communications and marketing. And so a lot of the time when I'm presenting back data from my team, I'm very much looking at giving integrated answers to strategic questions that are linked overall to organisational aims. When I'm presenting up, people are not necessarily so interested in the detail of how I got there. What they're interested in is the overall impacts and what change my team as a whole has been able to drive. So for me, when I'm thinking about evaluation, what I'm thinking about tends to fall into kind of two camps. There's the evaluation that I need for me as the director of comms and marketing to make sure that my team are correctly investing their time, to make sure I'm correctly investing my spend in the right kind of areas. And then there's also the evaluation that the senior team here need to be able to assess that myself and my team are actually spending the budget we've been allocated correctly and that we're contributing to organisational aims in the way that they have envisaged the team being able to do. I think when it comes to looking at the sort of evaluation that I need in terms of managing my team, and my team are a relatively small team, as you would expect from a kind of a university. One of the most things that is the most kind of precious commodity for me is my team's resource. And so my constant priority is, am I making the most of this? And so what I usually need to do in terms of evaluation on the PR side of things is look at things, have a set of targets that works on a macro level, but also be quite micro focused on a more regular basis. So on a macro level, at the start of each year, my team sets quite a wide range of targets, which will start with an overall sense of based on previous years, what kind of volume of coverage do we think that we need to be generating? It also looks at some very broad brush stuff around positivity. But then underneath that will be much more targeted in terms of which geographies are we needing to extend into. We are an international institution, we recruit internationally. What are the subject matters that we need to be covering? Because that is part of kind of how our reputational matrix has been made up. And are there particular kind of people that we're wanting to raise the profile of within that, because there is a particular, again, organisational need, which quite often links into things like fundraising or grant applications or things that have an end financial benefit. And so that kind of macro piece is something that we tend to come back to on a monthly basis and in more depth on a quarterly basis, to just really get that sense of, like everybody would expect, are we hitting these targets, but are we hitting them in the right way? So it's absolutely no good to us if we've done kind of one press release that suddenly hit all of our volume targets, if it's not covering off all of the other spaces that we need to be in. Then at a micro level, because again, as I say, my team resources is probably the thing that I'm most kind of protective of. Every press release that we do, every journalist engagement we do is an investment of effort. So for each one, we need to be stepping back beforehand and thinking, what are we wanting to achieve from this? What do we think is, put my thumb up, it tends to do that quite a lot, apologies. What are we wanting to achieve from this? What do we think that we might be able to achieve from this? What are our targets? And then how is that going to fit into these macro targets that we've already talked about? And that is then something that we probably talk about on a weekly basis in terms of in the run up to the particular activity and then post that activity, what it's achieved. And that balance between the macro and the micro is really important in terms of how we then adjust and move around our team work. Like I say, we might hit one set of targets really early on, and that actually then means the team needs to refocus on another set. So if we're having people coming to us internally and saying, we want to do more about X research centre, then it means that we can be in a position that says, actually, you know, we've done everything we usefully need to on X research centre this year. We now need to focus on Y research centre, who nobody's heard anything about. And it also helps us make, I think, all sorts of decisions, things like media targeting. So, for example, there are some stories where it's much more useful for us to be in, say, The Guardian, because it's got a really interesting international footprint that mirrors where we recruit from, than, say, The Telegraph, because it doesn't necessarily have so much. Vice versa, if we're putting something because we're looking to attract wealthy donors to sponsor a project, it's much more useful for us to be in the Telegraph than it is for us to be in the Guardian. And so, again, that constant micro monitoring really kind of helps us make sure we're reaching the right piece at the right time. However, when it then comes back to playing that back corporately and organisationally, very much how that's presented back is about what PR contributes to the overall aim and the overall work of the team, and it's done very much as a joined up piece. So if I was, say, reporting back against a particular kind of student recruitment target, which is something that I have to do kind of fairly regularly, how the PR side of things might feed into it is, do we have a particular scholarship in that area, for example, and then is there kind of PR coverage you've managed to achieve around that scholarship, and how many people have we reached as a result? What coverage have we managed to attract in the target territories for this particular student recruitment? So again, and then how is that added into the advertising we've been able to do in that area to help with our kind of overall reach? We often also present how PR has fed into other channels and other areas of work. So, for example, you know, one of the great things about getting coverage nowadays is that every single publication will also put that on their social media channels. They will also put that on their websites. So how has that enabled us to reach out, and how has that added again to our kind of footprint and our footprint within kind of certain kind of target audiences? And all of this is then presented alongside advertising reach stats, email open rates, numbers of website visits, all the other things that you would see, so that people are seeing PR as part of a coherent whole of how we're achieving a particular aim, as opposed to a standalone driver. And I think that, again, I always feel that that's quite important. I think we've had this kind of conversation, this discourse about how kind of different cost centres have to justify themselves. For me, it's quite unhelpful to kind of position it as a cost centre versus cost centre. What do you spend on advertising versus what do you spend on digital versus what do you spend on PR? What you want to do is to be able to get them all working together and understand where the various different benefits of the various different channels are, rather than necessarily having people kind of comb over the bones of, could you have spent £5 less on PR and £5 more on digital advertising, which is why certainly we've always worked to promote it as part of an integrated solution as opposed to standalone. And then finally, and I think that this picks up a bit on what Jen was saying earlier, you know, we are quite a small team. So I think the other thing that I would always kind of pick up on around evaluation is it's about data that we can use. It's possible to measure lots and lots and lots of different things, but actually it's only really worth us measuring the things that are actionable and that we can act on and change. So when we're kind of thinking about the metrics that we set up at the start of the year, it's really about how we answer the questions like, do we know what this activity has actually achieved? Do we know if it's contributing what we expected it to achieve? And what could we do to change it? And I think all of our metrics tend to come from answering those questions, whether that's actually across advertising, whether that's across digital, whether that's across social, whether that's across PR. It's about coming up with the things that that will actually be able to inform you doing your job better, as opposed to being able to present kind of 18 lines of data back to the FD, who, if they're anything like most of the FDs I've ever worked with, just don't have time to read them. They just want to know whether you've done the job with the money they gave you or not. So, those are my general points about how I approach evaluation in-house.
That's brilliant, Lorna. Thank you. Some very, very practical tips there based on experience. I particularly like the fact that you have brought all the different disciplines together, rather than almost creating either the typical silo effect or the typical competition for budgets in the broader marketing arena. I think that's particularly enlightened. So we'll go now to the panel discussion, and I think the first question actually is a broad question. I'm going to come to Jen first, because you all three of you are at the front line in different ways, but I just wonder, over the last couple of years, obviously we've been through an extraordinary time. Working practices have changed. Business has been under more pressure than ever before, and we're facing the pressure looking forward into 2023. But I just wonder, what changes have you seen, if any, in the way that your clients are approaching proving the value of PR to their organizations, to perhaps what you saw 3, 4, 5 years ago? What's changed? I'll go to Jen first and then come to Lorna and Leanne after that.
That's a really good question, Andy. I'd say one of the main things that have changed is the presence of good insights. I've seen so many reports that were stuffed with data, and people have had too much of meaningful data with dashboards that are completely meaningless, which I call dashboard porn. It just doesn't work anymore. So we've had clients come to us to say, well, actually we've got all of this data points, but how does that make sense? We've also got our budgets under pressure, so how can we make this work? And when we actually get to sit down with clients and review the objectives and understand what the goals are, not only the communications goals, but the organizational goals, understand the activities, and you look at the metrics that all these clients track, and you just realize that actually half of the stuff that they are tracking is not needed. So a great change that I've seen is actually the relevance around the stuff that we track. We just need to be able to measure what matters, not everything under the sun. You know, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. We're trying to understand what matters. So it's actually a positive change that perhaps, you know, our budgets are under scrutiny and we need to prove our effectiveness, and we can't demonstrate or we can't carry on without demonstrating our values. So I'd say, yeah, a big change that I've seen is the shift from data porn to actionable insights.
What a fantastic little soundbite that is. So yes, relevance and simplification is kind of the way I would almost summarize that. Leanne, you're at the sharp end. You know where all this data exists. You know, you can mine for it. You know, you've come into Freuds, you know, over the last, well, very recently, and you've got a research background. What changes have you seen?
Yeah, just to Jen's point about the sort of meaningless data. First, I always think a rule to live by is something that used to get hammered in at my first ever job, is to, when you get given that data, is to think, so what, so, or, and therefore, and that's how you can start to put meaning to what you're looking at. But something that I think I'm noticing a lot, and again is a really big positive, is that clients now, not only do they want to prove the success of the campaign, they are really cautious about, you know, the sort of strategic logic and the, you know, reason for why they're going to do a certain campaign to a certain audience. So something that I am starting to see a lot more is these sort of pre and post campaign measuring, and that's, you know, it can be through social listening, seeing what a certain topic, how much volume it's getting on socials, and then hopefully you can measure that after post PR and comms to show that it's risen. Or that can be in primary research, where it's sort of, you know, you're talking with real people, your target audience, understanding attitudes, and maybe the post is to get to a certain shift in attitude. So again, it's really positive, but it's something that I've noticed a lot more, that clients want that pre-measurement in order to show at the end, oh yes, this was a success, because there's nothing worse than trying to retrospectively measure success.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, knowing the outcome you're aiming for at the start of a campaign is critical, but it's sometimes incredible, I think, how many campaigns do start without a really clear view of what the outcome and the impact needs to be.
Yes.
And part of that, I think, well, a lot of that rests on the shoulders of the industry in not actually pushing that discipline. So, Lorna, you know, at the university, you know, you don't have huge budgets to play for, to invest in measurement and evaluation. So, I think you've been at the Royal College for about a year. Before that, it was at Courtaulds. What have you seen that suggests there is this trend towards relevance and not boiling the ocean? And is that a sort of maxim that you take with you in the work you do day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree about the kind of trend towards relevance. I think you see it within the team, and I think you see it at kind of senior level in terms of what people want to see, both at kind of S&T level and also at council level. People are very much interested in what's the actionable insight, as opposed to what are the kind of reams and reams of data. I think one of the things that I've also particularly seen kind of over the last few years from working inside an organisation is a much better understanding at a senior level of digital and digital coverage per se, and that's something that I've really noticed as a change, which I think really helps in terms of actually moving away from some of those kind of slight vanity metrics. So I can certainly kind of remember a time when you used to get a piece of coverage and you'd get it on kind of a website, the first thing that people would be is like, is it in the hard copy? Can I get hold of the hard copy? And if you didn't manage to get it in the hard copy, somehow it was an incredible kind of letdown that people didn't feel that you'd achieved your job. Whereas I think certainly the environment that we've been over the last few years, people are now much wiser to the fact that it's a lot more valuable to get something in a digital version than it is to get it in a hard copy version. They're a lot smarter to the fact that X person has posted this to their Insta feed and they've got 750,000 followers is actually much more valuable to us than if we'd got a piece of hard copy coverage somewhere else. So I suppose what it's a long way of saying is, I think things that we've probably always measured and known as a group of professionals had a certain value. People who sit outside of our particular specialist field are now starting to kind of get up to speed with that too and understand that too. And so I think gradually, I certainly feel comms is moving into a space where, as you say, there are far more meaningful metrics and there are far fewer vanity metrics. In terms of I can't remember the last time I just did here's a coverage book and it's this thick, which certainly at kind of points in my life would have been exactly what I was required to do.
Yeah, that takes me back to my early career, and we used to get upset if we go into a client and they hadn't got the most up-to-date clippings book printed out on the reception table, and if we did, or we went to a pitch and the clippings book was really thin, we think, okay, we've got an opportunity here.
Andy, can I just respond to Lorna, because I just loved what you said, Lorna, about the rise of digital media, and I think an important change that we have seen as a result of that was the integration of the measurement. So we need to look at various different media types, because we get all this digital media content. We're not able to, and as you said in your intro, we're not able to correlate some of that data with web traffic or advertising data, or how many people opened an email or downloaded a brochure. So that's also another trend that I've noticed, the integration of all of these media types, the integration of outputs data with outcomes data. So yeah, loved what you said. Just wanted to add that in.
I mean, that raises a good point, Jen, and a question in my mind, which is around skill sets. I mean, I think today's audience is primarily, from the PR communications industry. We've got a broad mix of, I think, agency and in-house practitioners on the webinar. What sort of skill sets do we as now PR professionals need to be either have already in our arsenal, or need to be acquiring? What education do we think that we need to be doing in order to be able to think in an integrated way, and not to be just pigeonholed as, oh, that's the PR department, they just do publicity and media relations? How do we become smarter on an integrated level? Interested in your views. Maybe Jen, do you want to go first on that? I'll come to Lorna and then to Leanne.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say two important skills, and Leanne, perhaps you will agree or not. I thought you wanted to answer. The first one, and it'll probably be good news, is storytelling. So, most PR peeps have it. So we just need to be able to tell a compelling story with data. That's the easy part. We know how to do it. I studied PR, I was a journalist. I knew that bit. I had to learn my Excel skills. I had to learn how to read the data. I had to learn, if I get a number, is that good? Is that bad? How can I contextualize that information? Should I create a benchmark? Okay, how do I do that? Do I research my organization? Do I research its competitors? Do I research or do I benchmark this number against its historical performance? So I had to be a little bit more literate with the data. So I'd say storytelling and also data literacy.
Great, brilliant. Thank you very much. Lorna.
I couldn't agree more on data literacy, actually. I think it's so important. I think you hit the nail on the head, Jen, there, where it's about being able to tell what a number is telling you, and being able to not just have that sense where you can churn out a load of numbers, but that you can look at 4 sheets of numbers and be able to go, actually, this one in the middle, this is the one that we need to be thinking about. And I think I quite often, when I was working in PR agency, I quite often used to say that my single most useful qualification was my D at A-level statistics, which although, as you will probably gather from that, I was not brilliant at A-level statistics, just the training that gave me in kind of what different sorts of averages were, kind of how various different data sets got skewed. So if I were giving advice to anyone starting out right now, I would say do some form of statistics qualification. It really helps. I think in terms of the that kind of point about integration, I'm kind of conscious I've done that journey because I started off very much as kind of PR person working in PR agencies, and as you very kindly pointed out at the start, Andy, and now we're I think I'm actually a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing as well as being a chartered practitioner. I know. So I think what I would say, having been down this route, is don't assume that you know more than you actually do. There is a reason that people have specialisms in areas of marketing. There is a reason that people have specialisms in certain digital fields. And I'm pretty sure that I've done it, and I particularly watched people from PR agencies do it as well, where you kind of come bounding in and like, we've had this great idea for an ad campaign, or we've had this great idea for a social campaign, without necessarily really understanding the field. So what I would say is a really good way to work your way through this is to build, you know, if you're working in a multi-agency environment, I would like nothing more than to see my agencies build that relationship with each other and genuinely come up with very good collaborative ideas, because you will learn from that, and as a whole you will generate kind of more better work. If you're working on an individual basis, do courses. I did a professional diploma in marketing. Do courses in PR, do courses in kind of digital. Like basically, you have all of the skills there. As Jen says, the storytelling stuff is really important, but actually a lot of the mechanics that sit underneath it can be quite different. And again, the data points that you get spewed out are different, that you have to be able to read. So integration is a bit of a journey, and you really need to work at it.
Yeah, I'm going to move, actually, I'm going to come to you, Leanne, now, but I'm going to actually pivot to a slightly different question that is related, just so we can cover as many topics as possible. So cognizant we've got 15 minutes to go. And it's about data access. How easy do you find it with your clients to get access to the data from across the marketing disciplines in order for you to do your job properly?
I think it's quite difficult, and it's definitely, it's difficult maybe down to like two things. One is maybe not realizing that you need access to that data at the start of a campaign, and then getting to the end and thinking, oh no, now we need to go back to the client and ask them to have access to XYZ. And then another is, sometimes it's private data, so they can't share it. But there are so many different ways to access data and be able to show success, and all different ways to flex this depending on what your budget is. And you know, you can go use things like Google Analytics, especially, so say if you're thinking about an integrated approach, like use your Google Analytics to show you the volume of traffic, the click-throughs. It's free, and then also just to think about telling your clients at the start, like, we should be using these KPIs and we should be using these measurement tools, and selling them in on the vision, so that you're not sort of left at the end thinking, oh no, okay, now I'm going to have to wade through however many articles to see which ones are actually applicable to the PR job that we did. Yeah,
great, thank you. I'm taking some questions actually now from the chat, and I would like, you know, if anyone does want to show their face and ask a question, just put your hand up from the reactions button. But Alice, it's very pertinent. So from Josephine, if you're a very under-resourced in-house team where rightly or wrongly outputs are highly valued by leadership, what is the one thing in terms of outtakes, outcomes, or impact you prioritize to measure? And obviously, I think I'm going to come to you for that, Lorna.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. Quite brief.
I actually, I feel like I might be able to really quickly talk from a perspective of it's just me on my team who does insights. Right. So I, as well as working with clients, also work internally with trying to show my colleagues how successful their campaigns are. So for me personally, things like volume, sentiment, trending topics, are some key measures that I will go to first to make sense of the story, and then hopefully I have time to dig deeper than that. Sorry, Lorna, I jumped in there.
No, not at all. I think that was a
I admire
really...
that. Lorna, what's your perspective?
So I'm going to give a slightly complex answer rather than just going to do this one, which is, I think some of this is about understanding your leadership team and your organisation and kind of what they really want ultimately, because that will probably lead you to the most important metric. I mean, usually my standard answer for this would always be impact, because ultimately it's about how you're getting to kind of what you're doing. But impact can be quite tricky to measure actually sometimes, and there's sometimes things that actually takes more investment to be able to measure than things like outcomes. I mean, certainly I would always hover around outcomes and impacts as being the key thing. I do, however, think it is sometimes about just trying to drill down to that real essence of what is the one thing they're wanting me to do here. So, you know, when I kind of step back from the many things that my team are tasked to do every single week, our job is to get students through the door, and as a secondary job, attract philanthropic and research funding. And so everything that I present back is in the context of, am I doing one of those two things? Now, we might have 40 outputs on various different channels across the course of the week that kind of, some of which touch on those more than others. But because that's the question that people are essentially asking of me, that's the way that I shape the answer. So I think some of that is about understanding, like, what is the absolute key thing the organisation wants you to do? Because if you're reporting against that, then A, it gives you an opportunity to push back on some of the outputs sometimes. Again, it gives you an output to push back on some of the outputs. It gives you a way to push back on some of the output requests sometimes, because you can very clearly track them against, is this helping us to achieve this thing, or is it not helping us to achieve this thing? But also, if you are achieving that thing, then you're doing what the organisation asks of you, and it helps you protect your budget line, and it helps you protect your team. So I don't know if that was a very helpful answer or not, and I'd be happy to elaborate on it, but that would be what I would say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Josephine, I don't know, either in chat or thumbs up or something. Does that helpful? So okay, we've got another couple of questions. Actually, we are joined by Richard Bagnall. For those of you who don't know Mr. Bagnall, he's been the recipient in the last 2 weeks of two of the biggest awards in the industry. That's Mr. Bagnall right there. The PRCA Mark Mellor Award for I think lifetime achievement. I haven't got the actual data here, Richard.
You've made a terrible faux pas, Andy. It's the CIPR's award. It's
my goodness.
CIPR President's Medal. No, the Mark Mellor Award. We have to have words with the PRCA. It's not got my name on it, that one.
So anyway, Richard's been very helpful. Thank you, Richard. Richard's been very helpful in chat with a couple of questions, and one of them actually, maybe, I think for all three of you, and we need to keep it brief, is, you know, what tips does the panel have to help convince PR professionals to lean in and embrace measurement? There is an argument that says, you know, my assertion at the beginning of this webinar, that if you can't prove it in 23, be nervous. And I think if that's one, you know, if ever there was a reason for any of us to lean into measurement, that's it. But do you have any tips based on your experience that would really help this team lean further into measurement and embrace it? Jen, very quickly from your side.
Yeah, very quickly. What cannot be measured cannot be improved. So that should be a compelling reason. If you want to improve, you should measure. You should understand your current performance and try and understand how you can then improve. If you just get measurement to just tick a box at the end of the month and just file your report, that's not a good start. If you can show your teams how you can optimize your communications impact, that's a very compelling argument.
Very good. Thank you very much, Jen. Yeah. Leanne, what about from your perspective?
I would say to not be scared by numbers, and if the numbers are coming out and it's not what you expected, then that in itself is an insight, and so go with it.
Lovely. Love how succinct you were there as well. Lorna.
I would say that everyone you might need to have an argument with at some point about budget or about what you're doing will probably use numbers. And so if you don't have your own set of numbers to be able to inform that argument and to be able to make your case, you're automatically on the back foot. I would also say that other disciplines within the integrated field are really, really good at doing this. Yeah. So it also it weakens your hand in an integrated comms piece too if you can't come up with a data-based explanation of why what you're doing helps.
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Okay, before I get to the classic final question, which just to get the panel thinking will be, what are the 3 things that you would leave the audience with? I just wonder, to everyone on the webinar, is there anything any other questions that you would like as a last minute question to the panel? No. Okay. Well, I mean, I think I could very easily go on. I mean, we've not drilled down into the importance or the impact of technology, automation, artificial intelligence. The conversation between human intervention and the machine, and how that can help actually provide measurement data, and also even to the point of providing insight. There's a whole conversation around that. But I think in the interest of time, because we will finish as planned at 2 o'clock, I'd like to ask the panel, what are the 3 most important tips that you would leave everybody with from this session? And I will I'm going to pick on Jen first. Jen, what are your 3?
Thanks, Andy. I'll be very quick because we only have a few minutes left. So first one, as I said, what cannot be measured cannot be improved. So you need to embed a culture of measurement within your organization. You need to upskill, you need to tailor your deliverables, you need to build better insights. Secondly, don't try and boil the ocean. Just pick one thing and measure the hell out of it. Not everything matters. Just pick the right thing. And thirdly, tell a story. Just tell a compelling story. Understand the audience, what the objectives are. Focus not only on the outputs but also the outcomes. So top 3 tips.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Leanne.
Yeah, so not to repeat Jen, but I'd say 1, be collaborative when you're setting or creating your measurement framework and what you're going to measure. Think about that integrated approach, who you can bring in, but also be collaborative with your client. Ask your client, will this meet the objectives? Are you open to measuring in a different way? This might help you measure success in a better way. I'd say 2, be forward thinking. Always think about is this going to cost money? Do I need to bring in a different expertise? Am I going to have to scope out some work to a different kind of supplier? Forward think, so you're not trying to scramble everything together in a week. And then finally, always refer back to your measurement framework throughout the project lifecycle, so that you always are rooted in what the ultimate objective of the campaign is.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Lorna?
My first 3 points everybody else has said, so I've very quickly come up with some extra ones. I think one of which is look at what other people are doing, because this is quite a kind of complex area and there are lots of different ways in which you can cut it. There are great case studies out there, particularly a lot of the kind of awards categories have evaluation categories, and it can be really interesting to read how other people are tackling things and kind of steal ideas. So that would definitely be something that I would recommend. I think the point about thinking about your own skills and whether or not you can read data, whether or not your teams can read data is really important, and actually making sure that data literacy and evaluation is part of your kind of training framework that you have for your team. And then the third thing that I would probably say is learn to do dashboards. Dashboards are really great. So if you can think of nice visual ways of pulling together your data that can be really regularly updated, it's the kind of thing that, when a senior manager suddenly does appear and it's what's happening with X, if you can send them a really beautiful slide with kind of 3 pie charts and 2 bars on, then you've answered their questions. So I think dashboards are also greatly underrated and would like to speak up for them.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm going to bring the session to a close. Before I do, Richard, who I also should mention was the longtime chair of AMEC, So he's quite correctly put into the chat for everybody. Go up to the AMEC website and look for the measurement maturity mapper. It's a phenomenally useful and powerful tool that enables you to get a sense of where you or your organization or your client are on your measurement journey. I hate using the word journey, it always reminds me of Strictly, but everyone is on a journey. And what the measurement maturity mapper does, it benchmarks you against an ever increasing number of data points that you can see where you are against other parts of the industry. Very, very useful. And I would really give a plug to all of the AMEC resources, as this is AMEC Measurement Month. You know, to Jen's point, have a look at the integrated evaluation framework, have a look at the education and training opportunities that AMEC provides, and lean into those. And don't be afraid, either with you as individuals or in your organization, to really lean into measurement and to understand the impact that we do have on our organizations. And don't be afraid to set the benchmark, to Leanne's point, where we're coming from and to, and then, you know, crowdsource or go through education to really improve your own skill sets. It's a huge topic, and it's one that will continue to rumble on, I'm absolutely certain, and we'll return to it in Measurement Month in November 2023. But for now, I would really like to thank Lorna, Jen and Leanne for taking their time to share their expertise and experiences with us. Jen, thank you for being the architect of this, and to Karma, who are a wonderful sponsor of the Greater London Group. They've helped us out through 2022, and for that we are very grateful. So thank you to Karma, and thank you to everybody for coming on to the webinar. I think you will get a link to the Zoom recording. If you don't hesitate to give me a call, give me a shout on email, and I will send it through to you. But I will call it a day, and thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.